The shocking news is out on Bill Murray, and it isn't good. For decades, Bill Murray has been Hollywood's beloved eccentric, the deadpan comedy legend whose random appearances at college parties, photobombing of engagement shoots, and unpredictable public antics have created an almost mythical reputation. His quirky off-screen persona seemed to perfectly complement his on-screen roles, making him one of the rare celebrities both admired for his talent and genuinely adored for his personality. But behind that carefully cultivated image of charming spontaneity lurks a much darker reality that the entertainment industry has long whispered about but rarely confronted publicly. Recent developments have forced a painful reassessment of Murray's behavior, transforming him from comedy's beloved rebel into something far more concerning. The Bill Murray mythology has been powerful enough to overshadow the reality for years, explained a veteran Hollywood producer who has worked with the actor. The quirky stories about him crashing weddings or washing dishes at someone's house party made great talk show fodder, but they masked more troubling patterns that insiders have recognized for decades. Now, as new allegations emerge and old stories resurface with fresh scrutiny, the public image of Murray is undergoing a dramatic transformation. The distinction between eccentric genius and problematic behavior has never been clearer, and the entertainment industry's long-standing tolerance of his conduct is facing unprecedented challenges. Tonight, we examine the shocking revelations about Bill Murray that have emerged in 2025, fact-check the most serious allegations, and explore how these developments are forcing both Hollywood and fans to reckon with the true nature of a man they thought they knew, but perhaps never really did. A female crew member's complaint shut down a $35 million film production. Murray's response? The inappropriate behavior was just a joke, but nobody's laughing anymore, especially not the woman who received a six-figure settlement.
There's news that Bill Murray has been accused of inappropriate behavior on a new film called Being Mortal.
1. Sexual misconduct allegation that halted a film. In April 2022, filming on Being Mortal, a $35 million production directed by Aziz Ansari and starring Murray alongside Seth Rogen, came to an abrupt and shocking halt. What began as an exciting adaptation of surgeon Atul Gawande's best-selling book suddenly became Hollywood's latest chocker Me Too flashpoint when a female crew member filed a formal complaint alleging inappropriate behavior by Murray on set. The specifics of the complaint, initially shrouded in studio secrecy, have since emerged through reporting by multiple outlets. According to sources confirmed by People magazine and other credible publications, Murray allegedly kissed the much younger female production assistant while both were wearing masks as part of COVID protocols, positioned himself inappropriately close to her, and engaged in other unwanted physical contact that made her deeply uncomfortable. The production company, Searchlight Pictures, owned by Disney, took immediate action, suspending filming pending an investigation. Despite the financial investment already made in the project and Murray's star power, the studio did not rush to resume production. In fact, 3 years later, Being Mortal remains in limbo, effectively canceled without an official announcement, a testament to how seriously the allegations were taken. It's extraordinary for a studio to shelve a project of that scale over misconduct allegations, noted an entertainment attorney who specializes in production issues. The financial loss alone tells you how significant this situation was. Studios don't walk away from that kind of investment unless the behavior was genuinely egregious or the evidence overwhelming. Following an investigation, Murray reportedly reached a settlement with the female crew member for approximately $100,000, a significant sum that further suggested the seriousness of the incident. The settlement included a non-disclosure agreement preventing the woman from discussing the specifics publicly or pursuing further legal action. What makes this case particularly significant isn't just the incident itself, but how it contradicts Murray's carefully crafted public persona. The man known for spontaneous, joyful interactions with strangers, crashing bachelor parties to offer relationship advice, or joining kickball games in public parks, was now revealed to have crossed boundaries in ways that left at least one colleague feeling violated enough to risk her career by filing a formal complaint. The power dynamics in this situation can't be overlooked, explained a workplace harassment expert who has consulted on entertainment industry cases. Murray is a legendary figure with enormous industry influence. For a crew member to file a complaint against someone of his stature requires extraordinary courage and suggests the behavior was serious enough to overcome the very real fear of career repercussions. The being mortal incident represents a turning point in how Murray's behavior is perceived, the moment when actions previously dismissed as Bill being Bill became impossible to separate from the broader reckoning around power, consent, and workplace conduct in Hollywood. Murray claimed it was just a joke, the same defense used by countless men caught crossing boundaries. But his own words reveal a more disturbing truth. He's done this before, and he still doesn't fully understand why it's wrong.
A difference of opinion with a woman I'm working with. I did something I thought was funny, and it wasn't taken that way.
2. Murray's own comments on the incident. In a January 2025 interview with The Guardian that was intended to promote an upcoming film project, Murray finally addressed the being mortal incident in detail, nearly 3 years after it occurred. His comments, rather than defusing concerns about his behavior, raised new questions about his understanding of appropriate workplace conduct and consent. "I feel sort of barbecued by the whole thing," Murray said, positioning himself as a victim of changing social standards rather than someone who had violated another person's boundaries. "It was something I thought was funny. I meant it as a joke, but it wasn't taken that way." Most troublingly, Murray acknowledged that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern. "I've done this kind of thing before, you know, in a way that I thought was funny, and it used to get laughs." This admission suggested that Murray had repeatedly engaged in similar behavior throughout his career, protected by an industry culture that dismissed or even celebrated such actions as harmless eccentricity. While Murray expressed some regret, saying, "It still bothers me," and acknowledging that times change, his framing of the incident revealed a fundamental disconnection from the gravity of workplace harassment. By focusing on his own feelings of being barbecued and emphasizing his humorous intent, Murray demonstrated a concerning lack of empathy for the woman who felt violated enough to file a formal complaint. Murray's response follows a familiar pattern we see with many powerful men confronted with misconduct allegations, observed a cultural critic who has written extensively about #MeToo in Hollywood. There's a partial acknowledgement of wrongdoing coupled with language that subtly shifts blame to changing social standards rather than the behavior itself. The emphasis on his own discomfort, rather than the impact on the victim, is particularly telling. The interview also revealed Murray's apparent belief that his intentions should outweigh the impact of his actions, a perspective that experts in workplace harassment identify as a common barrier to meaningful accountability. By focusing on what he meant, rather than how his actions affected others, Murray demonstrated the very mindset that allows inappropriate behavior to persist in professional environments. When someone says, "I meant it as a joke," after engaging in unwanted physical contact, they're revealing a fundamental misunderstanding of consent, explained a workplace harassment prevention consultant. Humor requires shared understanding and willingness from all parties. Using "it was just a joke" as a defense shows a person hasn't fully grasped why their behavior was problematic in the first place. Murray's comments also notably lacked any specific apology to the woman involved, instead framing the incident in terms of his own career consequences and emotional response. This absence spoke volumes about his perspective on the situation, suggesting he viewed himself primarily as the wronged party, despite having reached a significant financial settlement with the actual victim. The interview could have been an opportunity for genuine accountability, noted the cultural critic. Instead, it reinforced concerns that Murray still doesn't fully understand the impact of his actions or recognize the fundamental power imbalance that made his joke inappropriate in the first place. When Scarlett Johansson says something was really bad, Hollywood listens. Her careful comments about Murray suggest an industry-wide reckoning with a man whose behavior has been excused for far too long.
So excited to work with him.
I can imagine.
And, I think it was hard because we were, it was such a strange,
3. Industry and co-star reactions. The entertainment industry's response to the Murray allegations has been revealing, a mixture of careful public statements and more candid private assessments that suggest many insiders have long been aware of problematic patterns in his behavior. Perhaps most significant are the comments from Scarlett Johansson, who starred opposite Murray in Sofia Coppola's acclaimed Lost in Translation. In a March 2025 profile for Vanity Fair, Johansson addressed the being mortal incident with carefully chosen words that nonetheless conveyed the seriousness of the situation. What happened was really bad. Bill's had to face some hard truths. I think it's been humbling for him, which is necessary. Coming from Johansson, an A-list star not known for publicly criticizing colleagues, these remarks carried particular weight. other former collaborators have been more direct in private conversations while remaining cautious about going on record. Everyone's watching how this plays out, explained a talent agent with several clients who have worked with Murray. There's a calculation happening about whether to publicly support him, distance themselves, or stay silent. But in private conversations, many industry veterans are saying this has been a long time coming. Directors who have worked with Murray have been particularly conflicted in their responses. While some have defended his creative contributions, others have acknowledged the challenges his behavior created on set. Wes Anderson, who has cast Murray in numerous films, offered a carefully nuanced statement to The New Yorker. Bill brings something unique to every project, but that doesn't mean working with him is always easy. There have been difficult moments that I've had to navigate. The industry response tells us something important, noted an entertainment journalist who covers Hollywood workplace culture. The absence of the usual full-throated defenses we often see when major stars face allegations speaks volumes. There's no coordinated campaign of co-stars rushing to say, "This doesn't match my experience." That silence suggests many people have had problematic experiences with Murray, but weren't previously empowered to speak about them. Perhaps most telling are the reports from industry insiders about Murray's changing status in Hollywood. According to multiple sources, several projects that were developing roles specifically for Murray have been quietly reconfigured for other actors. While not publicly acknowledged as related to the misconduct allegations, the timing suggests studios are reassessing the risk of working with an actor whose behavior has become increasingly controversial. There's always been a Bill Murray tax, explained a veteran producer who requested anonymity. You got the brilliant performance but paid for it with unpredictable behavior, difficulty reaching him because of his lack of an agent, and his tendency to create tension on set. For decades, the industry decided the tax was worth paying. That calculation is changing now as the full nature of the tax becomes clearer. The industry's evolving response reflects a broader reassessment of how behavior that was once tolerated or even celebrated as artistic temperament is now being recognized as inappropriate and harmful. Murray's case represents a particularly challenging example of this shift, given his beloved status and the decades of mythologizing that have surrounded his eccentric persona. Hollywood is still figuring out how to handle these legacy cases, observed a media studies professor who researches entertainment industry culture. Murray isn't just facing allegations about recent behavior, he's confronting a reevaluation of conduct that spans decades and was previously framed as charming nonconformity rather than boundary violation. That's a more complex reckoning than we've seen with many #MeToo cases. The viral videos shocked fans. Murray aggressively confronting a theatergoer, then forcibly kissing actress Naomi Watts on live television. These weren't isolated incidents. They were public glimpses of behavior that's been normalized for decades.
I mean...
4. New viral incidents in 2025. While the entertainment industry was still processing the being mortal allegations, 2 new incidents in early 2025 thrust Murray's behavior back into the spotlight and further complicated his already damaged public image. The first occurred during a Broadway performance of Death of a Salesman in February 2025. Multiple witnesses and cell phone videos documented Murray becoming agitated with a theatergoer seated near him who was allegedly taking photos despite the venue's no photography policy. Rather than discreetly alerting theater staff, Murray confronted the man directly during intermission, with the interaction quickly escalating to what observers described as uncomfortably aggressive. He wasn't just asking the guy to stop taking pictures, recalled a witness, whose TikTok video of the incident quickly went viral. Murray was looming over him, using profanity, and making physical gestures that had security rushing over. It felt like watching someone who believed the rules of normal social interaction didn't apply to them. The theater incident might have been dismissed as an isolated outburst if not for what happened just 3 weeks later on The Tonight Show. Murray, appearing to promote his first major film role since the Being Mortal controversy, encountered actress Naomi Watts in the green room before their segments. When both were later brought on stage together for an unplanned interaction, Murray suddenly grabbed Watts and planted a kiss directly on her lips, a moment captured from multiple angles by the show's cameras. Watts' visible surprise and the awkward laugh that followed became the subject of intense scrutiny on social media. While she professionally navigated the moment without creating a scene, body language experts and cultural commentators noted her obvious discomfort. Watts later addressed the incident obliquely in an Instagram post, writing, "Some interactions should remain in the past. Consent matters. Always, everywhere, with everyone." These incidents are significant because they happened in public spaces where Murray knew he was being observed, explained a psychologist who specializes in boundary violations and consent. This suggests either a lack of awareness about how his behavior would be perceived or a belief that his celebrity status exempts him from standard social boundaries. Either explanation is concerning given the previous allegations. The timing of these public incidents, coming so soon after the Being Mortal settlement had become public knowledge, raised questions about Murray's understanding of the seriousness of the earlier allegations. Rather than demonstrating more careful attention to boundaries and consent, he appeared to be continuing patterns of behavior that had already resulted in significant professional consequences. What's particularly telling about these incidents is how they bridge the gap between Murray's public persona and private behavior, noted a cultural critic who has written extensively about celebrity misconduct. For years, fans could dismiss reports of difficult on-set behavior as isolated or exaggerated because they conflicted with the Bill Murray mythology of the charming, spontaneous cultural icon. Now they're seeing aspects of the problematic behavior play out in public spaces, making it harder to maintain that separation. These viral moments have contributed to a rapidly shifting public perception of Murray. Social media analysis shows a marked decrease in positive mentions of the actor, with many former fans expressing disappointment or disillusionment. The hashtag Bill Murray is over party trended briefly following the Watts incident, signaling a cultural turning point for a performer who had previously enjoyed unusual immunity from serious criticism. We're witnessing the collapse of the distinction between eccentric genius and problematic behavior, observed a social media analyst who tracks public opinion of celebrities. For decades, Murray benefited from the public's willingness to frame his unpredictability as charming quirks rather than boundary violations. These recent public incidents, viewed through the lens of the Being Mortal allegations, are forcing a reevaluation of that entire narrative. Hollywood's worst-kept secret is finally public. Bill Murray has been terrorizing sets for decades. From physical threats to emotional abuse, the stories reveal a man who used his power to bully colleagues while the industry looked the other way.
I'm excited to see. I haven't seen the movie yet, so I don't know what to expect. So I'm as excited as I am.
5. Reputation for difficult behavior on sets. The recent controversies surrounding Murray have prompted a re-examination of his decades-long history of difficult behavior on film sets, incidents that were previously treated as colorful anecdotes but are now being recognized as part of a troubling pattern. From his earliest days on Saturday Night Live through his most recent productions, Murray has left a trail of conflicts that the entertainment industry largely excused or minimized until now. Perhaps the most infamous example is Murray's relationship with director Harold Ramis, his collaborator on classics like Caddyshack, Ghostbusters, and Groundhog Day. Their final collaboration on Groundhog Day ended their friendship for over 20 years, with Ramis later revealing that Murray had become irrationally mean and completely inaccessible during production. According to Ramis, Murray's behavior included explosive outbursts, refusal to communicate, and creating such a toxic environment that the director required a bodyguard to mediate their interactions. "We never really patched it up," Ramis told The New Yorker before his death in 2014, having reconciled with Murray only shortly before. The depth of their rift, over 2 decades of estrangement between close friends and frequent collaborators, speaks to the severity of Murray's behavior during that production. Richard Dreyfuss, who starred alongside Murray in the 1991 comedy What About Bob, has been particularly vocal about his negative experience. Dreyfuss described Murray throwing an ashtray at his head during an off-camera dispute, missing him by inches. "He was a drunken bully," Dreyfuss stated in a 2019 interview. "He came back from dinner one night walking like Ernest Hemingway, and he walked up to me and said, 'I don't like you. I don't like the way you treat people.' And I said, 'That's interesting, because I don't like you, and I don't like the way you treat people either.'" According to Dreyfuss, Murray then picked up a heavy ashtray and threw it at his face. Lucy Liu has spoken about a confrontation with Murray during the filming of Charlie's Angels, where he allegedly targeted her with inexcusable and unacceptable language. In a 2021 interview on the Los Angeles Times Asian Enough podcast, Liu revealed that Murray began to sort of hurl insults at her after a scene was reworked. Liu stood up for herself in the moment, an action she does not regret, but the incident highlights Murray's reported tendency to single out colleagues for public humiliation. Director P.J. Hogan shared his experience working with Murray on the 1997 film My Best Friend's Wedding, describing how Murray made me wait for hours before he'd show up for wardrobe, and stating that once the actor did come to the set, he demanded the wardrobe lady be fired, for no reason whatsoever. These stories represent just a fraction of the reported incidents involving Murray over his lengthy career. Collectively, they reveal a pattern of behavior that goes far beyond the eccentricity or perfectionism often associated with creative genius. Instead, they suggest a performer who has routinely used his power and status to create hostile work environments while facing minimal consequences. What's striking about Murray's case is how long this pattern persisted without significant professional ramifications, noted an entertainment industry researcher who studies workplace culture in Hollywood. The anecdotes were framed as Bill being Bill rather than workplace harassment or bullying. That framing protected him from the consequences anyone with less star power would have faced for similar behavior. This reassessment of Murray's on-set conduct raises important questions about how the entertainment industry distinguishes between demanding artistic behavior and workplace abuse. For decades, Murray's actions were contextualized within a tradition of difficult geniuses whose creative contributions were deemed valuable enough to tolerate their destructive behavior. The industry is finally reckoning with the cost of that tolerance, observed a veteran producer. How many performers left the business because of interactions with difficult stars? How many creative visions were compromised to accommodate bad behavior? The full impact of these dynamics extends far beyond the specific incidents we know about. While Murray's public persona charmed America, women in Hollywood knew a different reality. New testimonies reveal a pattern of unwanted advances, inappropriate comments, and a systematic disregard for professional boundaries, especially with younger women.
I had a difference of opinion with a woman I'm working with. I did something I thought was funny, and it wasn't taken that way.
6. The pattern: inappropriate behavior toward women. As the entertainment industry reevaluates Murray's conduct, a disturbing pattern has emerged from the accumulated allegations and anecdotes, one that suggests his inappropriate behavior has particularly impacted women, especially those with less power and status than him in Hollywood's hierarchy. This pattern extends beyond the being mortal incident and the recent unwanted kiss with Naomi Watts. According to multiple sources in the industry, Murray has a long history of making uncomfortable comments, initiating unwanted physical contact, and creating situations where professional boundaries become blurred, especially with younger women in subordinate positions. There's a reason the being mortal complaint resonated with so many women in the industry, explained a casting director who has worked on several productions featuring Murray. It wasn't seen as an isolated incident, but as confirmation of behavior many had experienced or witnessed, but hadn't felt empowered to formally address. Gina Davis, who starred with Murray in the 1990 film Quick Change, described a troubling interaction during her first meeting with the actor. In her 2022 memoir, Dying of Politeness, Davis recounted Murray insisting on using a massage device called the Thumper on her despite her repeated refusals. "I said no multiple times, but he wouldn't relent," Davis wrote. She also described Murray pulling down the strap of her dress during their first television appearance together to promote the film, an uninvited physical contact that left her humiliated on national television. These incidents reflect a particular dynamic that appears repeatedly in accounts of Murray's behavior: interactions where women's expressed boundaries are ignored or treated as negotiable, creating uncomfortable power dynamics in professional settings. What emerges from these accounts is a pattern of behavior that specifically disregards women's autonomy, observed a researcher who studies gender dynamics in entertainment workplaces. The joke defense Murray has employed minimizes the impact of unwanted physical contact while placing the burden on women to accept the behavior as harmless rather than recognizing it as inappropriate. Multiple women who worked as production assistants, makeup artists, and in other support roles on Murray's films have shared anonymous accounts of uncomfortable interactions, though most have been reluctant to attach their names to these stories due to fear of career repercussions. These accounts frequently describe similar dynamics. Murray using his position of power to create situations where rejecting his advances or objecting to his comments would require directly confronting a powerful star, a risky proposition for those in junior positions. The power imbalance is critical to understanding these interactions, explained a workplace harassment expert. When someone with Murray's status and influence initiates unwanted physical contact or makes inappropriate comments, the recipient faces an impossible choice: tolerate the behavior, potentially encouraging more boundary violations, or object and risk being labeled difficult, humorless, or unprofessional, labels that can be career-ending for women in Hollywood. This pattern of behavior has been particularly difficult to address because it exists in a gray area that the entertainment industry has historically been reluctant to regulate. Actions framed as jokes, friendly gestures, or spontaneous moments of connection can create plausible deniability while still making recipients deeply uncomfortable and establishing troubling workplace dynamics. Murray's case highlights how behavior can be simultaneously normalized and problematic, noted a cultural critic. The very qualities that built his public persona, spontaneity, unpredictability, disregard for conventional boundaries, take on a much darker dimension when manifested as unwanted physical contact or disregard for clearly expressed refusals. As the entertainment industry continues to reckon with these revelations, the focus has shifted from individual incidents to recognizing the systemic patterns they represent. This broader perspective suggests that addressing Murray's behavior requires not just accountability for specific actions, but a fundamental reassessment of how power, consent, and professional boundaries operate in creative workplaces. For years, Murray has operated without an agent or manager, making him impossible to reach and unaccountable for his actions. Now, industry insiders reveal this wasn't eccentric. It was strategic, designed to avoid professional consequences for behavior he knew was problematic.
There was a time when my agent won't let me take a job that's, I only get paid this much, or something stupid like that, or a name director, or something ridiculous.
7. The no-agent strategy. Avoiding accountability. One of the most unusual aspects of Murray's career has been his decades-long refusal to employ an agent, manager, or publicist, a decision that has been framed in media coverage as charming eccentricity, but is now being reassessed as a strategic choice that limited his accountability. Since the 1990s, Murray has operated with only an attorney and a toll-free 800 number that he checks infrequently for messages about potential projects. This arrangement has created a situation where even directors eager to cast him often struggle to make contact, leading to legendary stories of filmmakers like Wes Anderson and Sofia Coppola persistently pursuing Murray for roles with no guarantee of response. The no-agent approach has been portrayed as Murray's quirky rebellion against Hollywood convention, noted an entertainment industry analyst. But in reality, it created a powerful shield against typical professional consequences. Without representatives managing his relationships with studios and productions, there was no clear channel for addressing problematic behavior or enforcing standard industry expectations. Industry insiders now suggest this arrangement served a specific purpose beyond the stated desire for independence. Without an agent or manager accountable to industry relationships and responsible for maintaining their client's professional reputation, Murray effectively removed the usual mechanisms through which behavioral feedback would be communicated and addressed. Agents and managers don't just negotiate deals, they manage relationships, explained a veteran talent agent. They're the channel through which concerns about on-set behavior are typically communicated. They have financial incentive to ensure their clients maintain positive professional reputations. Without that layer, Murray created a situation where there was literally no one whose job it was to tell him when he'd crossed a line or to help him understand the impact of his behavior. This absence of professional representation also complicated the industry's standard approaches to addressing problematic conduct. Studios and productions typically communicate concerns to a performer's representatives who then have both the access and the financial motivation to address these issues with their client. Murray's arrangement short-circuited this process, leaving productions with limited options for addressing concerns, short of the extreme step of removing him from a project entirely. The 800 number wasn't just quirky, it was a barrier to accountability, observed a production executive who worked on a film featuring Murray. If he behaved inappropriately on Monday, who would you even call on Tuesday? There was no manager to say, this behavior needs to stop. There was no agent whose other clients and relationships might be affected by his conduct. There was just an attorney whose job was to protect him legally, not to help him maintain professional relationships. This structural avoidance of accountability becomes particularly significant in light of Murray's admission that he had engaged in behavior similar to the being mortal incident before and thought it was funny. Without representatives responsible for managing his professional relationships and reputation, Murray operated in an unusual accountability vacuum that may have allowed problematic patterns to continue unchecked for years. Most performers rely on their representatives not just for career opportunities, but for professional guidance, noted a talent manager with several A-list clients. They're the ones who say, "That comment didn't land well," or "The producer mentioned you were difficult yesterday." Without those voices, it's much easier to develop blind spots about how your behavior impacts others. As the industry reassesses Murray's conduct, his unconventional professional arrangement has come to be seen less as charming nonconformity and more as a deliberate system that enabled him to avoid the standard professional consequences that might have addressed problematic behavior much earlier in his career.